Hey, do me a favor real quick. I want you to think about somebody that you talk about behind their back to other people. In a good way, in a really good way, okay? Maybe you just got convicted right now. No, I'm talking about somebody that you think is great. So somebody that you tell other people, hey man, this person is great. I love being around them. I respect them so much. This world would be a better place if there was more of this person. Like you can think of somebody like that right now, right? You end up singing their praises behind their back. And the reason you sing their praises is because you've watched what they've done. You watch how they treat other people. You watch how they conduct themselves. You know what they have done for you. That's why we end up singing people's praises, because we praise them for what they've done. For me, that list would be long. There's a lot of people I could put on that list. I'll just start with my dad. My dad has always been the model for masculinity for me. He's modeled it well, humility and strength. His work ethic and his character are unmatched. He's modeled that for me my entire life. What a gift to have. My mom is one of the godliest women that I know, a prayer warrior. She sends, every Sunday morning before I preach, she'll send me a text and say, hey, here's what I just prayed for you. She instilled a love for God's word in me. Awesome. Or guys like Neil, I've seen Neil do things for people he'll never get credit for. Like so many things behind the scenes. Neil has walked through, I don't know how many fires with me. Or a guy like Aaron, who has given me opportunities that I didn't deserve and certainly wasn't ready or qualified for. Or a guy like Sean, who is a source of wisdom and encouragement for me. Or Kelly. Like I can't even begin to scratch the surface with how much I think Kelly deserves praise. Kelly does so many things for so many different people, never asks for anything in return. I mean, she married me. I think she deserves a medal for that. Like, there's so many things that I could praise her for. Like, I love, admire, respect, and I'm grateful for so many things that those people have done. I could spend a couple hours talking to you about things that they have done. Sing their praises, because we praise people for what they've done. And if somebody's done something or done so many things that are praiseworthy, my question is, how could you forget something like that? If somebody does all these kind of things you're like, wow, that's impressive, that's really praiseworthy, how could you forget that? Well, the answer is actually pretty easily. It's easy to do that. That's what we're getting after in this series called Chasing Ghosts. We're looking at the concept of, hey, there's some great power in remembering, and at the same time, there can be some negative consequences to forgetting. This is a theme that you see in Scripture over and over again, to remember and forget. The Bible uses the word remember over 1,200 times. Remember, remember, remember. And if it says it that many times, there's probably a reason. And it's a pretty good reason. There's a story in Exodus, which is the second book of the Bible. And whether this is your first time in church ever, or if you've been following Jesus for years, I'm guessing that you've heard this story or heard about it. This story is really a cornerstone story in Scripture, and it's also foreshadowing quite a bit. So whether you've heard it or not, I want you to put yourself in the middle of this story. You're a slave. You're a slave in Egypt. And really for the last 400 years, you and your people have been building the infrastructure, the monuments. Really, you've just been building the ancient Egyptian empire underneath the hot African sun and under the crack of the Egyptian whips. There's no hope for you. No hope for you. The only promise that you have, the only thing that you can expect is more sweat, more exhaustion, and more pain with tomorrow's work. Like you've got no hope. The only thing you and your people have ever experienced is oppression, exploitation, pain, and loss. But that's all about to come to an end. Because God says, okay, no more. God sends this guy named Moses to free you. And only God could do this because Egypt was one of the major superpowers of the world in the ancient world. They were really at the height of their power. God sends this guy named Moses to free you from that slavery, and he uses plagues. And at first, the plagues kind of seem random to us, like frogs, darkness, or lights, the Nile turning to blood. That's kind of random to us, but it wasn't random at all. Not only were the plagues meant to break Egypt's hold on you and your people, but it was also a slap in the face to the Egyptian gods. The plagues all corresponded with one of the false gods of Egypt. So it was a way to free God's people and also at the same time mock the Egyptian false gods. And it worked because they let you go. The Egyptians let you and about 2 million people go free. And when you're going free, God also says, oh, by the way, when you go free, here's what else is going to happen. They're going to come give you all their gold and silver. So when you're leaving, be ready because the Egyptians are going to hand you gold. Sounds cool. And that's exactly what happened. You're being freed and you're walking out and Egyptians are walking up to you, handing you their gold and their silver. Like, this is incredible. Like, what do we make of this? And for the very first time in your life, you're experiencing what freedom feels like. That's kind of a hard concept for us to understand, but try to imagine experiencing freedom for the very first time. You've been given freedom. God just freed you. On top of that, he gives you all this kind of wealth from the people who oppressed you. You leave Egypt and he leads you out with this massive pillar of a cloud during the day, and then at night it shifts to fire. This blazing pillar of fire at night. Pretty awesome to see. Every single day and every single night, that's how God leads you through the desert. You're seeing this with your own eyes. You're experiencing it in real time, but yet it's still hard to believe because this is incredible. Incredible. He leads you through the desert and he leads you to the land that he's promised you, a land that your ancestors are from, an amazing land. But you run into another problem. You come to the Red Sea. You're standing in the sand right in front of the Red Sea, looking out at this massive body of water, and the Egyptian army is now caught up to you. They changed their minds and they chased you down. So you've got the Red Sea in front of you, the Egyptian army behind you ready to kill you, and there's nowhere to go. There's no way out. So this must be the end. But then God flexes his power again. He literally splits the Red Sea in two, walling up the water on both sides so that you and almost 2 million people can walk through it on dry ground to the other side. Like if being freed from 400 years of slavery, then seeing a pillar of cloud and a pillar of fire lead you through the desert, now this, so you start walking through it. But the Egyptian army isn't having any of this. They chase after you also. They go down that same path that you do, and God says, okay, we're done now with this. I'm ending this. He takes those two walls of water and collapses them down on top of the Egyptian army, ending that threat. It's over now. What's really cool, and this is interesting, is that they have found ancient Egyptian chariots at the bottom of the Red Sea. How'd they get there? Like, you get to see God do incredible things right in front of you. Not only is this awesome to see God's power, this is also foreshadowing what Jesus is going to do about 1,400 years later. How he's going to free all people from the slavery of sin by what he's going to do on the cross. This story also foreshadows people's response to God. How they respond to God when they see God do different things for them. And sometimes the foreshadowing is not that great. Now, you would think that if you saw God's power like this, you would be pretty impressed, right? I don't know about you, but I've never seen a massive body of water split in two. I've not seen that happen. I've not been a slave, or my people been a slave for 400 years. Our country isn't even 400 years old. You would think you'd be pretty impressed by seeing incredible power like that. You would think that if you saw the natural order supernaturally flipped upside down in front of your eyes, that you would be impressed and you would remember that, right? Psalm 105 actually gives a long list of things that God did for his people leading up to this point in the story. Then Psalm 106 gives a long list of ways how God's people responded to God. Let me read some of it to you. This is Psalm 106, starting in verse 6. Like our ancestors, we have sinned. We have done wrong. We have acted wickedly. Our ancestors in Egypt were not impressed by the Lord's miraculous deeds. They soon forgot. They soon forgot his many acts of kindness. Instead, they rebelled against him at the Red Sea. Even so, he saved them to defend the honor of his name and to demonstrate his mighty power. He commanded the Red Sea to dry up. He led Israel across the sea as if it were a desert. So he rescued them from their enemies and redeemed them from their foes. Then the water returned and covered their enemies. Not one of them survived. Then his people believed his promises and they sang his praise, because you praise people for what they've done. Keep going. Verse 13, yet how quickly they forgot. How quickly they forgot what he had done. They wouldn't wait for his counsel. In the wilderness, their desires ran wild. So what happens when you forget God? Or what can happen when you get impatient with him or you just let desires run wild? Well, quite a bit can happen. And a lot of it's not good. Psalm 106 just gives a couple things. They made a calf at Horeb and they worshiped the metal image. They exchanged the glory of God for the image of an ox that eats grass. They forgot God. They forgot their Savior, who had done great things in Egypt. So if you know this story, Horeb is Mount Sinai. God takes Moses on top of Mount Sinai for 40 days. You see God's presence on the top of the mountain in this massive cloud. There's fire, lightning, incredible sight. He's up there for 40 days. That's where God gives Moses the 10 Commandments. But while he's up there, these 2 million people that just got freed start getting pretty impatient. They're looking at their watch. They say to Aaron, who is Moses' brother, they're like, hey, Aaron, bro, we don't know what's going on with this Moses guy, but we gotta go. Let's speed this up. In fact, we need to worship something. So would you make us an idol? Aaron's like, all right, why don't you give me all the gold the Egyptians gave you? Give me all your gold and I'll make you something. So they give Aaron all of these earrings and jewelry, this gold that they got from the Egyptians. Aaron melts it all down and he makes it into a golden calf. They start worshiping this golden calf, this metal cow that they made with their own hands. They worship it and say, hey, this Israel, this is your God. This is the God that led you out of Egypt. This is the God that did all the plagues. This is the God who led you by a pillar of fire. This is the God that split the Red Sea in two. Here is your God. Like, what a slap in the face to the real God. I mean, how do you do that? Like, you see God work in these miraculous ways. You see his power with your own eyes. You experience the freedom that he's given you. If your first response to hearing what they did is, hey, these people are idiots, you would be correct. This was really dumb. But there's something really sobering about this story. What's sobering about what happened in Exodus and what Psalm 106 says is, man, I've done the exact same thing. Me personally, I have made golden calves myself. Not actual metal images of cows, but man, we can all easily do this. We can all easily forget God and start turning to idols that we make and worshiping those idols. Maybe not physical idols, but idols we make with our minds and make with our hearts. And if you're thinking, well, actually, no, man, I've never worshiped an idol and I never will, hear me. You're probably the person who is in most danger of this right now because you've already forgotten. Let's be clear about something right away. Idols are not just little metal statues. They are much more than that. I was talking to a guy, this was a while ago. He was doing a lot of work with churches and pastors in India. And he said the first time that he went over to India, it really kind of caught him off guard. India is a very polytheistic culture. And he said, when I got there, I saw little metal and wooden statues, all different kinds of sizes. People are bowing down to those statues, worshiping them and praying them. And I saw it everywhere. It really, it threw me for a loop. He said one of the first nights he was there, he got to have dinner with one of the pastors who was from that area and planted a ton of churches all over that region. And he just, in the conversation, he said, hey, have you ever been to the United States? And this Indian pastor said, oh yeah, I have. I've been once. I really enjoyed myself. It was great, but I'll never go back. And this American was confused. He was like, I didn't know how to respond to that. I was like, wait, hold up a second. You told me you went and you really enjoyed yourself, but you would never go back? Why? And he said, oh, that's because there are too many idols in America. The idolatry was too much. Idols are not just little golden statues that Indiana Jones would go after, or little things that all kinds of people would bow down and worship. In fact, in the Western world, some of the most popular idols don't take a physical form. Like, as clearly as I can say it, an idol is anything that you put above God. That's it. An idol is anything you put above God. And then you start worshiping that, in essence, as your God. An idol will have a hold on your emotions. It will control and have great sway on your thoughts, and it will be worshiped by you. Maybe not singing, but it will be worshiped by taking number one priority, the priority in your life. It'll be worshiped by how much time you give it, and it will be worshiped by how much it dominates your thoughts. Like, whatever we put over God, whatever we prioritize over God, whatever dominates our thoughts, whatever controls our emotions, whatever we're solely focused on, that's an idol that you will worship instead of God. So it can come in all different kinds of forms. Let me point out a couple of the easy ones, like money. If you believe, or at least live in a way where you act like the key to security and happiness is money, it has become an idol for you. Or sex. We live in a very sexualized culture. Sex is now worshiped. I don't think I have to convince you of that at all. It's worshiped so much that we attach identity to it. Or politics. This is an easy one to point out in the middle of an election year. There's so much despair or elation depending on who gets elected. If there's despair or elation around a candidate, that's a sign of idolatry. Or status. This is a silent obsession. Like, man, am I keeping up with the Joneses? How many subscribers, how many followers do I actually have? Man, who am I associated with? Because if I'm associated with high status people, well, my status is gonna increase because of that. Or even feelings. Feelings have really become an idol today, especially in our culture, where now we believe the highest form of good is acting on whatever you feel is good, whatever you feel is right. So we believe sayings like this, follow your heart, as if that's a good thing. And it's not. Jeremiah 17:9 says the human heart is deceitful. The most wicked thing there is. Who can actually understand the human heart? So feelings actually become an idol if they are the guide, if they are the standard of truth. This is what happens when we forget God. And when I say we, I mean anybody. Whether you are a follower of Jesus or this is your first time, you don't believe in Jesus at all, it doesn't matter. Whenever we, all people, forget God, this is what happens. We forget God, then we turn to idols. And when we turn to idols, we attach our identity to idols. So if money is an idol, then what I'm gonna do is my identity is gonna be attached to my net worth. What's my salary? How much do I have in the bank? What's my net worth? That's my identity now. Or sex. If sex is an idol, then man, we're gonna attach identity to sexuality all day long. This is incredibly popular. But let me just be clear and as gracious as I can with this. Do not attach your identity to sexuality. That is a shallow form of identity. You are so much more than your sexuality. Or politics. Again, it's easy to attach identity to politics. This is why things get so tense so quickly. Because if you criticize a candidate that I vote for, you're criticizing the party I support. And if you criticize the party I support, you're criticizing the policy I believe is best for all people. And if you criticize the policy I believe is best for all people, you criticize the way I view the world and how it can flourish. And if you criticize the way I view the world and how it can flourish, you're criticizing my understanding of the Bible. And if you criticize my understanding of the Bible, you're criticizing my understanding of who God is. And if you criticize my understanding of who God is, then you are criticizing my core identity. That's the downward spiral real quickly. So if I forget God and I turn to idols and I attach my identity to any idol, what is gonna happen is if you question something I believe, you're not questioning something I believe, you're questioning me as a person. And everything starts to fall apart. In general, this isn't true for everybody, but for a long time in this society, a lot of people found their identity and their faith in Jesus Christ, but we've forgotten that on the whole. And because of that, we've turned to idols, and we attach identity to idols, and then everything starts to fall apart. The reason why all of us right now feel like everything's just kind of unraveling around us in front of us in real time, it is. And the reason why, as simply as I can say it, is because we've forgotten God. Why everything is happening right now is because we've forgotten God. Shaping metal in your garage into the image of a cow or another statue is not a very common practice in the Western world, but the shaping absolutely still happens. It absolutely does. Like what we like to do is we like to shape God into the image that we like and what we want. A God that believes what I believe. A God that thinks the way I think. A God that says what I would say. A God that does what I think it should do. Oh, absolutely. Because then God becomes a lot more convenient to obey or ignore, depending on your circumstances. Shaping God to fit your expectations or your desires or your feelings or your circumstances. It's one of the most dominant and popular forms of idolatry today. Instead of listening to what God said in Genesis 1, let us make man in our image, one of the most dominant forms of idolatry today is, hey, let's make God in our image. And the reason why is because we've listened to the lie in Genesis 3. What Satan said, you can be like God. You can be your own God. Man, don't fall into that. Don't fall for that. You are not your own God. Money, sex, politics, status, feelings, those are horrible gods. And if you attach your identity to that, that's a horrible source of identity. And I'm telling you this, if you go after those gods, if you put your identity on those things, I'm telling you, you are going to be sorely disappointed and it will lead you to nothing but pain. Because hear me on this, an idol is just a counterfeit of the Creator. That's all an idol is. It is a counterfeit at best. An idol tries to replace God, or it says, you know what, we're going to elevate creation above the Creator. Romans 1 says almost verbatim what Psalm 106 says, almost verbatim. And it gives actually a little bit more detail. It shows a little bit more of this downward spiral that happens when we forget God and we start turning to idols. When we start worshiping counterfeits instead of the Creator. I'm going to read a big chunk of this. This is Romans 1. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things like a golden cow. Therefore, God gave them up to the images, the lust of their heart, to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie, and they worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions. For the women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another. Men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty of their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness, evil, covetousness, malice. They were full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, maliciousness. They're gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to their parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. They know, even though they know God's righteous decrees that those who practice such things deserve to die, and every single one of us has done multiple things on that list. Even though they know God's righteous decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but they give approval to those who practice them. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death. That's why affirming any sin is the most hateful thing somebody can do, because now you're affirming something that leads to another person's death. That's the context of Romans 1. That's the context of Psalm 106. It's exactly the context that we're living in right now. People exchanging the truth about God for a lie. People exchanging the glory of God for a long list of idols. And because of that, people exchanging the natural order that God has created for a long list of destructive things that only lead to death when God created you for life. Every single one of us can do this too. We can fall into the exact same thing the Israelites fell into. We can do all of the things that Paul is warning the church in Rome about. So before you start pointing your finger at that person over there, I think all of us need just to make sure we look in the mirror first. And I don't want to exchange God for anything. I don't want to exchange him for anything. But here's what I know. I know that I'm a broken and sinful man. Like if we played a video right now on the screen of my life in full review, things that I've said, things that I've done, things that have gone on in my mind, not going to be good. I don't know that I could make it out of here. I'd have to run out of here. I couldn't look any of you in the face. I'm a sinful, broken man. I can exchange this stuff for just like anybody else can easily. I don't want that, and I don't want that for you. So how does it happen? And how do we actually get there? How do you get to the spot where you exchange God, the God who's done so much, the God who parts the Red Sea, the God who walked out of the grave? How do you exchange God for anything else, anything on that list? It starts with forgetting. In Psalm 106, it lists all these different things that they did, but just in a short section, 3 times it says they forgot. 3 times. They forgot God, they forgot what God has done, they forgot God's love. And not a, oops, I forgot, it slipped my mind. No, there was something else going on. There was a little detail that led up to forgetting. Verse 13 said, how quickly they forgot what God had done. Here's the key. They would not wait for his counsel. They got impatient. That's what happens. Impatience actually accelerates forgetting. Here's how it works. If you are impatient, what you will do is you will focus on what's not happening right now instead of remembering what already has happened. Oh man, the economy still isn't getting any better, or the political landscape is messed up, or my kid keeps doing this, or my friends keep acting like this, or my boss keeps doing that, or we still haven't gotten a good diagnosis yet. You're focusing on all the things that aren't happening instead of remembering what already actually has happened. And something I hear all the time is, well, Matt, what about all the bad things that actually happen? There's so many bad things that are happening in the world. I agree. There's always bad things that happen in the world. But what about all the bad things that didn't happen that we don't know about? Because God did something. Like, what about that natural disaster that we've never heard about? We never heard about it because it didn't happen, because God intervened. Or what about that cell in your body that didn't get a chance to metastasize and spread throughout your body because God crushed it before it ever happened and you never knew about it? Or what about that toddler who did not get hit by the car because God intervened? Or what about that terrorist attack that none of us have ever heard about because it didn't happen because God intervened? Yes, bad things happen in the world. They always have, they always will. But what about all the bad stuff that never does happen that we don't know about because God intervenes? Having that perspective comes a lot easier if you remember all the good he already has done. But if you get impatient, you'll forget. And if you forget, you'll turn to an idol. Patience is a lost virtue in our culture. You know how I know that's true? I watch how you drive on I-25. Me too, okay? No, it's a lost virtue. But at the same time, patience is a fruit of the Spirit, is it not? So you could say impatience is the opposite. Impatience is actually a fruit of pride. Because if I'm impatient, what I'm actually doing, and I tell you what, my wife could testify to this. This is the one I struggle with the most out of the fruit of the Spirit. God's always working on this with me, is patience. If I'm becoming impatient, what I'm really doing is I'm making it about me. It's pride. And if I have tried to shape God into what I prefer based on my convictions, my feelings, and my desires, then I'm gonna have expectations for how God should act and when he should act. And if he doesn't live up to those expectations, I'm gonna get pretty impatient. You see how that works? So if you were here last week, this is just another reason for us to slow down. Slow down. If you're anxious about what's gonna happen today or what might happen tomorrow, if you're stressed out, if everything feels like it is not going your way, if you're concerned about what's happening in our country, slow down and be patient. That doesn't mean be complacent. Just slow down and be patient. Because if you get impatient, you'll forget God. And if you forget God, you'll make a really bad trade. Like exchanging the truth about God for a lie. Or exchanging the glory of God for some busted idol that is a counterfeit at best of who God really is and what he's created. And one of the ways that you can tell, one of the first ways you can tell if you've forgotten God is worship. Worship will always be the first thing that goes if you forget God. Because all of us, whether you're a Christian or not, all of us, we're all created to worship something. We're all worshiping something or someone. Whatever you are worshiping, that's your God. And again, this is kind of a hard concept to think of right off the top because it's like, well, man, I really don't sing about a whole lot of things. When it comes to worship, along with singing, that's one of the smallest types of worship that we do. So, man, if you don't know what you're worshiping, another way to tell is, what are you really focused on? Because you will worship what you're focused on. Not like, hey, I'm gonna focus on my job for the next 8 to 9 hours. No, that's a good thing. But am I taking my job home with me? Is it dominating my thoughts? What do I focus my time, my energy, my resources on? What you focus on could be an indication of what you're worshiping, especially when things aren't going your way. Whatever you turn to when things aren't going your way, that's a good indication of what you're really worshiping. Or trust. You will worship what you trust. You will worship what you trust to make your life more comfortable. It's human nature. Or anything that fulfills the expectations you have for how things should operate in the world and at what pace. Whatever you trust, you will worship. Another way to tell is enjoyment. You will worship what you enjoy. I mean, actually, I would say this, that pleasure and enjoyment naturally, spontaneously overflow into praise. Like what I mean is, if you go to a good restaurant, a new restaurant, and you love it, you're telling everybody about it, aren't you? Like you're telling your friends, hey, we went to this new restaurant. It was killer. Like the food was awesome. Vibe was awesome. Like we can't wait to go back. We actually should go as a couple. You're going to praise. We love to praise what we enjoy. I mean, I went to this new golf course. It was fantastic. I didn't play that great, but the place was pure. It was awesome. I can't wait to go back. Guys, we got to get a tea time. Like you always praise what you enjoy. So I'd actually say this, that our joy is incomplete until we praise it. You're not fully enjoying something until you praise it to somebody else. Love is not complete until it's expressed. Our joy is complete when we worship what we enjoy. So do we enjoy God or do we enjoy something else? Like again, there's so many good things that God has given us to enjoy as gifts. But where's the line when I start worshiping that? You know, for me, like I'll bring up golf again, something I enjoy. That's a good gift that God gives. I start worshiping it when it dominates my thoughts. When all I can think about is the next time I can get on the course. Who likes food? Who's a foodie? I got a list of restaurants. That's awesome. One of the things that Kelly and I love to do is either cook good food for people at our house or go out on a date with other people and just enjoy good food. Man, it's a good time. Go slow. But when that dominates my thoughts, when that takes all of my focus, when I trust in a golf course or a restaurant to relieve the stress or anxiety or pressure that I'm feeling right now, I'm turning to that as an idol. It's a fine line. Now, our faith and our worship is not based on our feelings. Faith that is built on feelings is a faith that will be forgotten. The feelings are great. They're great. But feelings shift, do they not? Feelings change, feelings go away. So if you try to build your faith on feelings that you've had or feelings that you want to have with Jesus, that's like trying to build a skyscraper on sand, because what happens when those feelings start to shift? When they're not there anymore. And if I could always feel God, what's the need for faith? Feelings are great, but our faith is built on fact. If you try to build your faith on feelings, that's how you end up worshiping a golden cow, because it's easy to forget when those feelings aren't there. That's why when the Bible talks about remembering, when it says it 1,200 times, it never says, remember how you felt, never says that. It says, remember what God has done. Remember what he did, remember what he said. There's power in remembering. Real relationships aren't built on feelings either. Like my marriage to Kelly is not built on my feelings for her. We certainly have feelings for each other, but I don't know if you know this, but sometimes married people don't like each other. Like sometimes the feelings aren't great. It's always on her end, not mine. Like I could never not like her, right? No, but seriously, there's times where you don't have those feelings. And if our feelings between her and I aren't great, I don't forget her. Why? Because our marriage, our relationship is built on who she is. It's built on the promises that we've made each other. It's built on the trust that we've both accumulated over years and years and years of things that we have done. I've watched what she does. I've watched her character. I watch how she lives up to her word. There's so much trust. Our relationship is built on that, the experiences we have together. So now feelings just become a byproduct. And if you take the byproduct part of it, actually feelings are much greater when the relationship's only built on trust in who the person is and what they've done. Our relationship with Jesus is the same way. It's built on who he is, not how he makes us feel. The feeling part is great. We worship not because of what God makes us feel like, but we worship because of who God is and what he's done. We worship to complete our joy. We worship to give God glory. We worship so that we can remember. Last week we talked about if you want to remember, say thank you. Also, if you want to remember, worship, because you will remember what you worship. So if you're anxious about what might happen today or what might not happen tomorrow, if you're stressed to the max, just slow down, remember what God's already done, say thank you, and then worship him. Worship him for what he's done. The God who created the universe, the God who created you in his image, the God who parts the Red Sea, the God who frees people from slavery, the God who sent his son to conquer death, the God who walked out of a grave, the God who is currently sitting on the throne as we speak, and the God who will come back and make all things new. Remember that and worship him for that. Because if you remember that and what he's done yesterday, it's a lot easier to rely on him today. So in a second, we're going to worship him. We're going to worship him to complete our joy and worship him so we can remember. If you look at a lot of the songs that we do here, it's never about what sounds cool. If it does, that's great. That's a byproduct. First and foremost, it's all about theology. In almost every song that we sing here, you're going to hear something about what God did, or about what he is doing, or about what he will do. And it's all based on who he is and what he's done. We want to worship so we can remember. So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to worship together. Jesus, thank you for being more than enough. Thank you for creating us. Thank you for flexing in so many ways. I just ask that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear and a heart and a mind to understand how you have worked, what you have done. Let us not forget. Let us not turn away to idols because we got impatient. Let us see what you've done. Let us see what you're doing now so that we can remember you and give you the worship. Do not let us turn astray. We're so weak and we can do that so easily. And we just want to honor you and give you glory right now with our worship. My prayer is that this would be a blessing to you, that this would be an offering that you would receive with pleasure. We love you. It's in your precious name we pray. Amen.